Reverend Norbert Stevens, General Secretary of the United Church in Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, Professor Wendell Abel, Professor of Mental Health Policy in the Department of Community Health and Psychiatry at the University of the West Indies, Mona campus, Reverend Newton Dixon, President of the Jamaica Council of Churches, Dr. Orville Nemhard, medical doctor and health specialist, clergy and members from other congregations. Ladies and gentlemen, the peace of the Lord be with you. In this our 80th anniversary as a congregation, it is with a great sense of responsibility that the Webster Memorial United Church, through the efforts of our Harvest Committee, seek to maintain our duty as facilitator of discourse and decision-making among our people being our members, our adherents, and others from the wider community on an issue that affects all our lives, the COVID-19 vaccine. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused immense health challenges among the populace, untold grief and dislocation across our land, and unimaginable pressure on our health system. The production and provision of vaccines in an effort to counter the impact of the virus has been met with suspicion in some quarters, ambivalence in others, and genuine ignorance in certain areas. It seemed important to us then to provide a second opportunity for discussion and the sharing of informed insights as presented by today's panelists, thereby allowing for you, our audience members, to have your questions asked and answered. We are especially pleased to have the participation of our United Church's General Secretary, the Reverend Norbert Stevens, who is not only a member and former pastor of Webster, but who is participating this evening as the moderator of this very important conversation. A very warm welcome, Reverend Stevens. Our medical specialists who have kindly agreed to share the evening's proceedings will give their own perspectives. Dr. Wendell Abel as mental health specialist and Dr. Orville Nemhard, public health specialist. The Reverend Newton Dixon will bring the theological perspective to bear upon our reflections. Welcome to all our panelists. It all remains for me then to extend once more a warm welcome to all of you who are joining us on the various platforms, and to extend and express my pleasure that you're all here with us. I hope that you'll not only find the evening informative, but that your questions and your concerns will be addressed to your satisfaction. I invite you, wherever you are, just to bend your spirits with me in prayer. Let us go to God in prayer. Holy God, in whom humanity finds healing and wholeness, we thank you for this evening. We join with all creation in declaring how great is our God. We praise you for Jamaica, for her sights, her sounds, her scents, for the creativity and the indomitable spirit of her people, for the wonderful opportunities of life that you present to us every single day. We praise you that neither panic, pandemonium, or pandemic can stop you from loving us, and that your presence is with us as we navigate the challenges and the changes of this period of our lives. As we meet like this to deliberate on this very important aspect of our common life, we pray your guidance upon our conversations. Lord, may our thoughts be married with yours. May our words be guided by yours. May our actions subsequent reflect your desire for us. Bless the leaders of our nation. Bless us as your people, and keep us faithful to the cause of national health in all its forms. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord and our Savior. Amen. I now hand the evening's proceedings over to the Reverend Norbert Stevens.
Thank you, Reverend Astor Carlisle, and welcome to those who are viewing this webinar on the issue of vaccines. Just want to begin with a little bit of data, and I'm sure my panelists will do the same. As of yesterday, there were 85,475 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Jamaica. Of that number, there are 29,132 active cases, and we have had 1,964 deaths. As a response, the government has been very clear that in step with the global strategy, the real option is to create herd immunity by vaccinating people. And the target of the Jamaican government is to have 65% of its population vaccinated fully by the first quarter of 2022. At the moment, we are at 9.8%. So we are still some way away from that target. And between that target and this present time are some challenges that have been articulated by Reverend Carlisle, that we have persons who are suspicious about the vaccine, who have myths about the vaccine, who have challenges about the strategy, who are just simply not on board. And so the task of this webinar is to inform as many persons as possible around the issues related to the medical, the religious, and of course the mental health areas. We want to also provide an opportunity for persons to raise their questions and to voice their concerns. So you can do this by dialing or calling 876-861-9655, and you can post your questions there. I'll receive those questions and I'll pass them on to the panelists. The way in which we will proceed is that each panelist will be introduced by myself. We will offer that panelist, I'm told 10 to 15 minutes, but most of them won't take 15 minutes, to share their presentation, after which we will have a session of questions, and the panelists will respond to the questions and concerns raised. So it is my task then to introduce our first panelist this evening, who has left the building. I've not seen him on the platform, which is Dr. Orville Nemhard. But until he comes back, I'm going to invite Reverend Newton Dixon to make his presentation. But before that, I would like to just share with you a little bit about who Reverend Dixon is. Reverend Dixon is an ordained minister of the African Methodist Episcopal Church and is presently the pastor of 2 congregations in the parish of St. Elizabeth. He's a graduate of the Jamaica Theological Seminary in Kingston, Payne Theological Seminary in Ohio, USA, and University of Geneva, Switzerland. In 2018, he was elected to the office of President of the Jamaica Council of Churches, an office he still holds, and is a firm believer in the unity of the church, a calling to which he is deeply committed, and has spent several years in active pursuit and fulfillment of this mandate. Reverend Dixon, welcome, and please proceed in sharing your presentation with us.
Thank you very much, General Secretary, my brother, and moderator, Reverend Stevens, and to Reverend Carlisle, and my co-panelists, Professor Abel and Dr. Nemhard, to all my colleagues in the ministry, brothers and sisters on the various platforms. I greet you warmly and express gratitude for the honor of being able to join you today, this evening, to address what I believe is a national concern. And that's a non-debatable fact, I believe. I wonder, Brother Jensek, if I could be able to share a PowerPoint presentation. Would that be possible?
You're able to do so. Please proceed.
All right. And I'm trying, there we go. Brothers and sisters, Reverend Carlisle, please ignore this note. Psalm 126 should not be there. Reverend Carlisle suggested that we would be hearing a theological perspective. I think he might have raised the bar a little too high and hence your expectations, but I'm going to try to address the issue. And within the context of a theological appreciation, I want to use some source material, since I am not myself a strong theologian, but I will try to use some material which I think will point us in that direction and assist in a theological and probably a biblical understanding or appreciation of the issue we want to address. So in the next 14 and a half minutes, I'm going to ask you to just follow with the text. I'm sorry there are no pictorials nor videos. I'm not yet that technologically savvy either. But let's proceed. And if the screen will, all right, so there we go. Please accept my thanks and for the invitation to join tonight for this webinar, which has such an audacious topic. It's crunch time, let's erase COVID-19. Your topic carries with it not just a sense of urgency, but I sense impatience. If I am right, then the urgency is with going forward, and the impatience is with those things that and maybe indeed persons who might be pulling us backwards or keeping us from going forward. Your topic implies that we're already either at the point to move forward or we must hurriedly get there. Whichever is the case, I prayerfully hope that my few words will assist in the process. An observation before we proceed. I think the church is now at this nexus between crisis and opportunity. I say this because I think, as we all agree, there's a crisis which threatens our lives and our existence, but an opportunity to provide leadership, proclaim hope, and assist our nation to prevail. In this regard, I think your initiative, my brothers and sisters, is particularly meaningful and relevant. So I propose to do three things. To sort of provide the theological undergirding, I would like to share the JCC's position on the issue of vaccination against the COVID-19 disease. And this is contained in a statement which was issued in August. Second thing I'd like to do is to address two of the questions which reflect the present day convergence between faith and science, and not so much in an academic way, but the man in the street is having this conversation, genuinely or otherwise, about faith and science. And I'd like to adopt a man in the street approach by answering two of the questions that the man in the street seems to be asking. And finally, I'd just like to ask for permission to share my personal perspective as a pastor concerning the discourse regarding truth and the COVID-19 era. So let me read, and you may follow, this statement issued by the Jamaica Council of Churches in August of this year. The Jamaica Council of Churches notes the vibrant debate which has ensued due to concerns about vaccinations. This debate has unfortunately divided us once again into competing camps, with its attendant incivility and disingenuity of the discourse. While we affirm the right of all persons to their opinions and freedom of expression, the Council nonetheless encourages decent and respectful conversation, which is undergirded by truth, on all matters of national interest, especially the present and urgent concern regarding vaccinations. The Council therefore takes this opportunity to state its position and to provide pastoral guidance on the deployment of vaccinations in our nation. This is rooted in our understanding that science is a gift from God and is an indispensable component of our nation's capability to ensure a good quality of life for its people and the ordering of our society. The experts in epidemiology, of which Jamaica has been blessed with several accomplished, world-class, and highly respected practitioners, tell us that the most effective way to overcome the present distresses with the COVID-19 pandemic is the inoculation of a majority of the population. The experts tell us further that all of the vaccines which have been approved by the World Health Organization are safe and effective in combating the COVID-19 disease, including the Delta variant, which was recently confirmed to be present among us. The scientific data, which has been garnered by these experts from around the world, as well as from the Jamaican experience, indicate with a high level of certainty that the persons who are at greatest risk of severe sickness and or death are the unvaccinated. We therefore implore, beseech, and encourage all Jamaicans who have not yet been vaccinated to do so as soon as it is possible, sparing no effort or cost. In addition, we encourage continued adherence to the long-established protocols of wearing a mask, physical distancing, and hand sanitization, as they continue to prove to be effective and useful for the preservation of life. And here we dig into a little theologizing. Our understanding of the sanctity of life demands that we work in personal and communal settings to preserve life and the quality of life. Indeed, scripture tells us that it is God's will that we have life, quote, have life and have it abundantly. John 10:10. In addition, we affirm the social ethic of the Bible, which, among other imperatives, urges us to always act in ways that serve the common good. Quote unquote, love your neighbor as yourself, recorded in Mark 12:31. That, I believe, is a good basis, maybe not sufficient, but good enough to move on to addressing two of the questions that the man in the street is encountering. The first is that the COVID-19 vaccine is the mark of the beast. And one of the texts which refers to this phenomenon, the mark of the beast, is found in Revelation 13:18-11. I don't have time to read all of it, but I suggest that we spend a moment in our own time to take a quick look at this text. It speaks of another beast coming out of the earth with horns and the dragon and so on and so on. And it speaks of a set of precursors that come before the mark of the beast. But there's a problem, because there is no unanimity in the church on how we interpret the book of Revelation. So let me suggest three ways that I think are commonly used across the globe. One approach proposes that the book of Revelation describes and addresses events and concerns in the writer's day. Therefore, to understand that book, these thinkers say we must look to the contemporary Roman history to provide meaning for the book. In other words, we have to go back to John's day to make sense of Revelation. A second approach is a predictive approach, which suggests that the main purpose of the book was to prophesy about future events. We find that each generation, therefore, that uses this method regard their era as the end of time. And as one of the writers I have consulted, Barry Banstra, says, no less than 7 dates have been given for the end of the world already. 1843, 1844, 1874, 1914, 1975, 1984, 2000, and here we are again with that contemplation. And the third is the approach which presents the book as one which transcends time and place. In other words, the book is intended to show the universality of the struggle against evil and the ultimate triumph of God and good despite the odds. It seems that the popular approach that many Jamaicans use, maybe without even knowing it, is the predictive approach. So let's use the predictive approach and apply it to Revelation 13, 11 to 18. I'd like to raise 2 points. The predictive approach tells us then that these things are going to happen. And the things it lists are in the text I referred to. But 2 points will spring out when you read the text. One is that there has to be a certain worldwide establishment and acknowledgement of 3 evil characters, the dragon, the beast, and what is referred to in the text in Revelation 13, another beast. The second point that will jump out is that the pursuit and accomplishment of 3 objectives have to happen: working of wonders, obtaining worship, and waging war, a universal assault against God's people. When we look, if we use the predictive approach at this text, we have to conclude that the precursors to the imposition of the mark of the beast are not present among us, not yet in this world, if the predictive approach is the correct approach. There are no known individuals that have completed all of the activities listed in Revelation 13, 11 to 18, which are ascribed to the beast and the other beast and the image of the beast and then the mark of the beast. So because even in a literal sense, it doesn't match up, it doesn't add up, we have to dispel the idea that the vaccine is the mark of the beast. Please read it, the text for yourself. I have to hurry on. The second issue is that taking the vaccine means we have no faith. We undergird our lives with the idea, the notion, the belief, the view that God provides in creation all that we need for life. Science, as one of God's provisions, is a gift from God, the benefits of which have made incredible and invaluable contributions to the quality of life. Science helps us to understand our world and live in it wisely. So in addition to the marvels of transportation, telecommunications, construction, etc., there are also a multiplicity of benefits of medical science. And one of these benefits is the development of vaccinations. What it seems to me that is urgent is our use of wisdom in addition to faith in addressing and appropriating this gift and the benefits of this gift in the present time. The wisdom I refer to is the wisdom that helps us to discern when a thing is good, when a thing serves the common good, when a thing serves an objective that advances the well-being of not just a few, but almost everyone. So let me rush on in the next 2 minutes to my perspective. Most of us who were born after 1960 have taken at least 6 vaccines. A case study I read on vaccination of Jamaican children states that due to the strength of its immunization program, Jamaica was able to successfully eliminate poliomyelitis in 1982, measles in 1991, rubella in 2000, while the last case of congenital rubella syndrome was recorded in 1998. And I hope I'm not straying out of my lane into the lanes of Dr. Nemhard or Professor Abel. This case study states further that in 2019, Jamaica's immunization schedule offered vaccination against 12 vaccine-preventable diseases, as recommended by the WHO. The majority of these vaccine doses are delivered in the first year of life, along with measles, mumps, rubella, MMR vaccine, and booster doses of polio vaccine in the second year of life. And since 2010, the child health passport is issued at birth and is the individual's record of vaccination. I received all of these vaccines, which I am now convinced was the responsible action which my country took to ensure that this was done for me in the interest of my health and well-being. In fact, I think also that it was done this way because my parents could never have afforded all of these vaccines. So I would have succumbed to one of the structural inequities that create some of the maladies in our country, poverty. We have been protected from dangerous diseases by vaccinations all our lives. This is the world standard, and Jamaica has met it excellently. And so I close with the idea and the admonition that faith and wisdom will lead us to discern what ought to be appropriate actions. And in the face of this pandemic, I believe it is, or at least one of those initiatives would be to consider the value of the vaccines. I present those thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Dixon. You have shared with us the position of the JCC, which is to encourage persons to take the vaccine in the pursuit of personal and communal health and wellness. You have addressed two matters related to the mark of the beast and those who feel that if you take the vaccine, you have no faith. And you have ended by reminding us that faith and wisdom combined will lead to appropriate action. There's some other questions that I'm sure people will ask you about mandatory vaccines and so on, but we'll get back to that. Thank you very much. We are still not seeing Dr. Nemhard. I know that he's having some problems with his internet, but we have with us someone who went to the right school, if I may say so. He went to Ulmer's Boys. And if you went to Ulmer's Boys, you must be a brilliant person. I wish to introduce Professor Wendell Abel, OD. Professor Abel is a consultant psychiatrist and therapist who has over 25 years of experience providing counseling services, cognitive behavior therapy, drug counseling, and marital counseling to clients in a variety of treatment settings. He holds a Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery, a diploma in psychology, and a doctorate in medicine from the University of the West Indies, Mona, as well as a Master of Public Health from Johns Hopkins University. Professor Abel is currently the head of the Department of Community Health and Psychiatry at the University of the West Indies, Mona. He's a member of the Medical Association of Jamaica, Jamaica Psychiatric Association, Cochrane Mental Health Research Group, and the American Psychiatric Association. Professor Abel has been instrumental in formulating several mental health policies across the region and has written several newspaper articles, academic papers, and case reports for the government and mental health agencies. In recognition of his service and innovation in the field of community mental health and social services, Professor Abel was conferred with the prestigious Order of Distinction in 2007. Professor Abel, welcome, and we invite you at this time to share your perspective on obviously the mental health issues related to the vaccine that we are wrestling with in Jamaica.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm kind of stumbling because I'm wondering if I should really be focusing on mental health issues in regards to vaccine, or probably extend my talk to a wider issue. And I think I'm going to kind of go off track a little while and look at the wider issues, but certainly speak to some of the mental health issues in regards to vaccine. Now, let me see if I can bring up my PowerPoint presentation, and it's here, yes. And so I want to speak to us from a wider perspective in terms of coping with COVID, because I think by now, many of us are recognizing that COVID is going to be here for a long time. And I will probably take it a step further to say, for as long as we want it, because there are certainly some things that we can do and we must do in order to contain the pandemic. Nobody knows, but he knows my sorrow. Yeah, nobody knows the trouble I see. And I start by sharing the song. I don't know if you heard it, that nobody knows the trouble I see. As we sit here tonight, we all recognize that our world has shifted. And wherever we are, we're having a shared experience dealing with surges, lockdown, some situation, job loss, layoff, school closure. My heart goes out for the children. Some people experiencing financial problems, economic challenges, illness and death. And that's certainly part of the reality as we deal with yet another surge. In Jamaica, people are getting tired of the physical distances, our social lives limited, and even the way we work and worship, as we all know, has been changed. And with the pandemic has come a whole host of mental health problems. In fact, early last year, not early, but middle of last year, we had done a study at the University of the West Indies looking at the psychosocial impact of COVID on Jamaicans, and 55% of people reported that they were having depressive symptoms. Another 55%, a little more than half, reported that they were having anxiety symptoms. And what is interesting is that 97%, which is almost 100% of persons, say we need psychosocial support. And it is in that context I'm kind of responding to this call to share with us a few tips in terms of how to deal with COVID. These mental health intervention or psychosocial support may not erase it, the COVID itself, but certainly we hope will erase some of the mental health problems associated with COVID. And, I think all of us, as we sit wherever we are this evening, we're grieving. And I just want us to remind ourselves that grieving is a response to a loss, because there are days when we experience feelings that we don't even understand. And it is because we have all lost something. Our rituals have been disrupted, our routines, think about it, even just going to church on a Sunday morning. It's no longer the norm, right? The numbers are restricted. We have to be joining church online, right? And if it is that we all find that we're going through this grieving process, we want us to remind ourselves that it's normal and natural, and that this grieving is understandable and expected. And I want us, wherever we are, just to repeat, it's normal and natural. What the COVID has done for us, a lot of us, is it has left us to question the meaning and purpose in life, yes? In fact, some people refer to it as an existential crisis. And this existential crisis has challenged us. It has gone to the core of our existence and forced us to ask the question, what is it? What is the purpose of living? What are the things that bring meaning and purpose to our lives, especially as a lot of the things that bring meaning, like the celebrations, the rituals, the birthdays, the weddings, the anniversary, going to church, shopping, all of those have been disrupted. And we're left to reckon with this, what matters. And I think a lot of us increasingly are recognizing the things that are important are connections, personal connections, the sense of community. A lot of people have turned to their faith, even more so, and we recognize that spirituality is important. And for many of us, increasingly, we're recognizing that what matters a lot more is a need to just reach out and help others. And I think as we have this discussion, we're forced to reckon with and recognize that personal and collective actions are important. The need to stick to the COVID protocol. And these days we're now having the discussions around vaccination. We're recognizing that as a world, if we want our world to get back to normal, if it is that we want our children to get back to school because their lives have been disrupted in a significant way, we need to take the vaccine. If we want to be able to get back to meeting as a church community face to face without the constant disruption, it's going to be important for us to accept our personal responsibility and that personal and collective action. And so as we navigate this pandemic, there's no playbook, yes? We've all had to learn as we go along. And so I want to quickly share with us some tips for coping during these times. And one of the first one is that we need to remind ourselves how important it is to maintain that attitude of gratitude. There are lots of things that we can still be grateful for, grateful to be alive, grateful that we have food on table, that we have friends. I'm grateful that we can join the conversation this evening online. And, whenever I do these conversations, as I refer to them, I'm always encouraged by people who say, well, I'm so grateful that I'm blessed that I'm not stressed, or I'm grateful for life. I'm grateful that I have food on my table. And so I encourage us, count our blessings, remembering that we're not alone, and gratitude will take us through these times. Another important tip is that we need to be positive, yes? The news can be very confusing, scary, hopeless, and encourage us to set limit on our television time, internet, social media, and to decrease the conversation around COVID. Everything doesn't have to be COVID. And it's a social media, I think, that has generated a lot of the conspiracy theory. And they seem to have to be winning that battle in terms of the messaging out there and highlighting a lot of the negative issues around vaccination and so on. And, it's so important for us to filter the news these days. And as we go through this pandemic, I encourage us to live now in the present, focus on the here and now. And it's very important for us to accept those things over which we have no control and focus on the things that we cannot control, right? And certainly for those things over which we have no control, to recognize that there is a power greater than us, right? That we can take all our anxieties and all our cares and certainly leave them at the mercy seat, certainly leave them there. Self-care is also important, and self-care is not about being selfish. It's about taking care of ourselves. And, a lot of us are running on emotional empty as we deal with the stresses and the psychological impact of COVID. And so I remind all of us of the importance of just taking care of ourselves. just follow the instruction. You know, when you go on an airplane and the flight attendant is giving that safety detail, she'll tell you, or he will tell you that if the aircraft is in problems, the oxygen mask will fall from the ceiling. And what you need to do before you try to save anybody, you pull that oxygen mask over your nostrils, save yourself, take care of yourself, right? And part of self-care is about taking care of our sleep, general activity, diet, and our general health, right? And as we navigate the pandemic, we're increasingly recognizing that an important part of the self-care is also protecting ourselves. And that is why vaccination is so important. It's so important for us to stay calm in the chaos. And I think as we do that, we need to recognize that, you know, we go through emotional roller coaster and we need to deal with our feelings on a daily basis. And I want to pose a question to you. How are you feeling? You know, name your feelings. A lot of us, fearful, anxiety, disbelief, depression, frustration, grief, whatever it is, name your feelings, right? And I want to emphasize, just today, somebody was sharing with me how they were feeling, not feeling well for the past few weeks. And I had to remind them that, look here, it's okay not to be okay sometimes. And I want us to remember that it's okay not to be okay sometimes. So when you're going through tough days, rough days, don't be hard on yourself. Just remember, it's okay not to be okay. Another important thing for us to do during these times is just to be compassionate with ourselves, right? And an important part of being compassionate with ourselves is just to just be easy on ourselves and remind ourselves that in many instances, we're all doing our best. And wherever you are, I want you to take your right hand, put on your left shoulder, left hand, put on your right shoulder. And as you do that, I want you to tap your shoulders. And this is called the butterfly hug. And as you do it, I know it feels comforting and some of us are smiling. And I want us to do that on a daily basis. And it's a technique I want us to share with the children, to tell them to be compassionate with themselves and to give themselves the butterfly hug as often as they want on a daily basis. We recognize the importance of keeping in touch, right? That family, friends, and our faith, all important. And as we keep in touch and reach out to each other, remember the people who are the elderly, the sick, people living alone, increasingly recognize one thing that COVID has brought to our attention is that support matters. And that sense of community is so important, and connection. Certainly, as we reflect on the pandemic, we all recognize that it's an opportunity for us to reset our lives, to slow down, find more time for family, friends, and more time with God. Increasingly, a lot of people, as I said earlier, turning to their faith, right? Certainly a time to reconnect with self, others, and God. And of course, we also recognize how important it is. Everybody, my actions count. And I want everybody to repeat that. My actions count. The importance of adhering to the protocols. And increasingly, we're emphasizing and encouraging vaccination. And in fact, you know, my position is that the direction in which this country is going, if it is that we want to get our children's lives back to normal, to get the economy back to normal, to just getting back our lives to normality, vaccination, it has to, it's going to become, mandatory. You know, what was a turning point for our childhood immunization in Jamaica was when the government made it mandatory, right? That children had to be fully vaccinated to go to school. And we're heading in that direction. We're going to have to get to that point if it is our lives and our community is going to return to normal. And so in closing, I just want to say that everybody, as you listen to me, you are all important to me and I need you all to survive. Thank you very much. I would have played the song, "You Are Important to Me, I Need You to Survive."
Thank you so much, Professor Abu. You have certainly shared a wide range of issues in relation to how we cope with COVID-19, that we're all sharing experiences that are common among us, the surges, the lockdown, the way in which our social lives, our work life, our worship lives have been impacted. You spoke about the fact that we're grieving in some way and that we're facing this existential crisis. And there's really no playbook, but then you've offered some tips that are helpful in terms of how we then cope in the midst of all of this, among them how we should reconnect, how we care for ourselves, how we remain calm, how we're positive, how we give a sense of gratitude to each day and every gift that we have in our lives. And you have also made the point that it is your belief that vaccines should be mandatory. We'll come back to that, Dr. Abel, when we take the questions. Thank you so much. Our third panelist, who has had some challenges with his internet, but is back with us, really should need no introduction, but I'm going to introduce him nonetheless. He is Dr. Orville Nemhard. He is currently director and founding doctor of Health Plus Associates, a family care medical center in Kingston, a graduate of the University of the West Indies with Bachelor of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery. He holds a master's in public health from the University of the West Indies, a Master of Business Administration from the University of Leicester, and a Global Program in Occupational Health Practice certificate from the University of Illinois in Chicago. He has been practicing family medicine since 1987. It would take us too long to share his training and exposure, both local and overseas, as well as his skills as a family physician and his business acumen for over 37 years. But these are important, and I want to include some of them. He has worked with the Ministry of Health, Jamaica as a medical officer of health. He has served on the executive of the National Road Safety Council of Jamaica, and he had a very successful stint with Glaxo Wellcome Caribbean as medical advisor and subsequently Caribbean area manager. He is currently associate lecturer at the University of the West Indies Faculty of Medical Sciences, and his research interests include epidemiological and policy issues on injury prevention and HIV disease. He's a contributor to a number of articles and publications on the areas that he has a passion for. Welcome, Dr. Nemhard. We remind our viewers that you can call in your questions at 876-861-9655.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the invitation to speak at this forum and for the warm welcome. As I have had some challenges with my internet, I will not dawdle because I don't know when next it will act up. So I'm going to go straight into my presentation. All right, so I want to talk a bit about facts and myths as it relates to the COVID-19 vaccines. And I will immediately make my disclosure, which is that I am an approved provider of COVID-19 vaccines under the government's public-private partnership initiative to administer COVID-19 vaccines. So I start off as an unrepentant pro-vaxxer. Let's start at the very beginning. What is a virus? It's an infectious agent of small size, simple composition that can multiply only in living cells of animals, plants, or bacteria. And the coronaviruses, which we've heard so much about, are a group of related RNA viruses that cause diseases in mammals and birds. In humans and birds, they cause respiratory tract infections that can range from mild to lethal. Mild illnesses in humans from these coronaviruses include the common cold, of which there are many. And more lethal varieties give rise to SARS, MERS, and now the COVID-19. Note that the coronaviruses in cows and pigs cause diarrhea, while in mice they can cause liver disease and brain and spinal cord disease. So these viruses as a group are really unpleasant in the symptomatology that they can cause. What do we know about the coronavirus and COVID-19 disease? It's a viral infection caused by coronavirus SARS-CoV-2. It can progress to severe acute respiratory syndrome with pneumonia and acute respiratory distress syndrome. The disease was introduced to the world in 2020. It has spread rapidly to become a pandemic with over 219 million confirmed cases and over 4.5 million deaths worldwide, as at the end of September 2021. Person-to-person transmission is suspected to occur primarily by way of respiratory droplets, that is coughing and sneezing. The clinical features, which we're all pretty much familiar with now, average time between exposure and your developing symptoms, it's about 5 days. 98% of persons will develop symptoms usually within the first 12 days of exposure. Up to 50% of persons will be asymptomatic, that is, they'll have no symptoms. We speak about it being rare in children. However, the Delta variant has changed our thinking of that, in that younger persons are actually now more commonly affected. The symptoms, again, very familiar: fever, dry cough, shortness of breath, fatigue, muscle pain, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, headache, weakness, and patients can present with the so-called non-classical symptoms, where they get isolated gastrointestinal symptoms. I've seen patients who are presented with just diarrhea, nothing else. And then you have those who present with the loss of smell and the loss of taste. The disease has a fairly wide distribution of severity. 80% of persons experience mild or no disease. 14% will experience severe disease, and critical disease will affect only about 5%. And the overall case fatality rate is 2.3%. So all the excitement that is being made about COVID and the deaths really only apply to about 2% of those who are affected, and 81% of persons who have mild or no disease, sometimes not even aware that they ever got the illness. 14% with severe disease, 5% with critical disease. The challenge with these spectrum of disease, of severity, however, is that when you get COVID as an individual, you have no idea which category you're going to fall in. So we've seen young, healthy persons end up dying from COVID, and we've seen persons in their 90s and 100s go through COVID with no problem. So that's the challenge of COVID disease. You have no idea when you get COVID, which category you will end up in. Home management is recommended for patients with mild symptoms, and patients with severe disease require hospital care. The complications we see in hospital: pneumonia, respiratory distress syndrome. But note, we see liver injury. Remember, we did point out that some of the coronaviruses in some of the species do give you liver disease. So not a surprise that this coronavirus in humans, apart from the lung diseases, we're getting liver disease, 20%. We're getting heart disease as a result as well, up to almost 20%. Persons who are presenting with heart failure and persons who are getting heart attacks from COVID-19 disease. Clotting, we see a lot of pulmonary emboli in COVID-19 disease. Kidney disease, up to 10%. And here it is, the cerebrovascular disease, the strokes and the mental changes which take place as a result of this virus. So what determines who falls in perhaps the asymptomatic category, the severe category? Well, being male and over age 65 and being a smoker increases your risk of progression to the severe category. Other factors which do this: if you have cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, diabetes, hypertension. These are the underlying conditions which we talk about. Now, a lot of people misinterpret the issue of underlying conditions and COVID disease to say that, well, if I have the underlying conditions, then I shouldn't be taking the vaccine. It's quite the opposite. The persons who have these underlying conditions, we want you to take the vaccines because these conditions are exactly what will predispose you to having severe disease. So cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, diabetes, hypertension, you're the persons that we actually really want to take the vaccines because your risk of serious illness, if you get ill, is in fact increased. So there are some things we know. We know that the viruses continually change through mutation. And when the virus has one or more new mutations, it's called a variant of the original virus. There are several current variants of the virus that cause coronavirus disease, which are creating concern worldwide. So we had the Alpha variant, which was identified out of the UK. Then came the Delta variant, which has become the dominant variant worldwide. There has been talk about the Mu variant, but so far it does not seem to be overtaking the Delta variant, which continues to be the dominant one. And even recently, there has been talk of another variant called the R.1, which we're watching closely because the thought is that it perhaps is able to escape the vaccine protections which we may have. But time will tell whether or not that's really the case. What we do know again, vaccines will not prevent you from getting COVID-19. And this is in contrast to what was stated earlier. The optimism earlier was that having gotten the vaccine, you would not be able to get COVID-19. That has been proven to be not so. The vaccines will not prevent you from getting COVID-19, and it will not prevent you from spreading COVID-19. However, fully vaccinated people are protected from severe disease and death, including the variants to date. So most COVID-19 hospitalizations and death are among persons who are unvaccinated. So the benefit of the vaccine really is to protect yourself at the end of the day. It's not going to prevent you from getting the disease. It's not going to prevent you from spreading it, but it certainly has shown itself to prevent you from having severe disease and also progressing to death. So a bit of dark humor here. It's the admissions for the unvaccinated only, and it's the morgue. There are some things we don't know. We don't know where COVID came from. We don't know how long natural immunity to COVID lasts, and the debate is pretty hot on that. We don't know how long vaccine immunity lasts. Vaccines are still new. We really haven't had more than a year, maybe a year and a half of experience with it. We don't know if COVID will go away, and all indications are it probably won't. We don't know if we will need booster vaccines, and we don't know if the vaccines will protect against further mutations. Now, this is a lot not to know, but then there's also a lot that we do know. What we saw in the States is that their pandemic was running wild. This is towards the end of 2020. Vaccines were introduced there late December, and this is what happened to their number of cases. It fell precipitously. So that was real-world evidence of vaccines working. By the time they hit June, however, Delta variant came around, and you saw the cases begin to rise again. This coincided also with the release of some of the protocols. So early on, with the optimism of what the vaccines could do, there was talk of, all right, if you're vaccinated, you cannot wear your mask. You don't have to get into some of the physical distancing and so on. As we learned, that was not quite so. And so with the introduction of the Delta variant and the relaxation of some of the physical distancing and protection methods, the numbers began to rise. Reintroduction of the methods and a doubling of the vaccine administration strategies, and the numbers are beginning to go down again. So in a country like the USA, where across the board, they have like 56% of their population immunized, they are still having a significant increase in number of cases per day. Our figures for complete immunization hovers somewhere at around 10%. So we have a significant way yet to go if we're going to prevent ourselves from seeing further increases and continued rolling of COVID cases across the board. Now, just in case we forget, there are lots of diseases that we don't even talk about anymore, and that's thanks to vaccines. So there's tetanus, polio, hepatitis A and B, rubella, measles, Hib, Haemophilus influenza B, pneumococcal disease, whooping cough, rotavirus, mumps, chickenpox, diphtheria. The point here is that vaccines have been with us for a long time, and vaccines work. There is a history and a knowledge behind vaccines which has taken us to where we are. Now, this is the person of the moment. This is the coronavirus, the electron microscope picture. We see these red prongs on it, which are the spike proteins. These spike proteins are important for the virus to latch on to our body cells and to be able to enter the cell and cause mayhem. The spike proteins also are the point at which the vaccines are used to attack the virus to create the immunity that we need. So the spike proteins are very important for the virus from the point of view of its ability to attack. And from our point of view, it's the same spike proteins and the information regarding that we use to program our bodies to provide the attack against the virus. Important to note that, again, we're talking about the coat of the virus, the outer coat. The genetic material of the virus is within this. And it is, as we say, has been famously put together in a video, I think, by Dr. R. Scott. Essentially, what we're talking about here is just the hat of the bad man. That's what the coat is. And we have taught the body to recognize the hat. The body has not and is not exposed to the bad man itself in terms of the genetic material from the virus. So the genetic material of the virus is not used at all in creating the vaccine. All we've used is the coat, and the body has been taught to recognize just the coat, the hat, so to speak. So what are the vaccine types available for COVID-19 disease? Well, there's the Pfizer-BioNTech and the Moderna. Both of these use messenger RNA technology. Now, everybody gets all caught up again with this. This is new technology. It's never been done before. It's a new vaccine. Yes, we never had, video phones before. Technology has moved on. mRNA technology allows for the message to be sent to the cell to produce the spike protein, which the body then forms antibodies to, which will be the proxy for when the virus comes at you. The mRNA, it's just a messenger. It does not enter into the nucleus of the cell, and for its hard work, the reward that the messenger RNA gets, having delivered its message, is that it is destroyed. So that's one of the myths straight away we can debunk. The mRNA does not go into the nucleus of the cell. It is not able to alter the cell. It's not able to program the cell. And in fact, it is destroyed once it's delivered its message. So that's the Pfizer and the Moderna. Johnson & Johnson uses an adenovirus delivery system. Adenoviruses are commonly found in cold causing cough and cold flu viruses. And what has been done is the virus has been programmed to produce the spike protein. Again, the body now recognizes the spike protein, forms its antibodies to that, and will destroy it upon delivery of the actual COVID virus in real life. So all of these vaccines that we're using commercially are using the same approach. It's the spike protein that they're going after. They're just using different methods in which to allow the body to identify it. Pfizer and Moderna using mRNA technology, AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson using adenovirus delivery system. And it explains also why the side effect profiles between these two and these two are so similar, because of the technology that they're using. So what are the issues? Some people say the vaccine development was too fast. I mean, normally it takes decades to put a vaccine together. That's absolutely true. But SARS occurred in 2003, and the research was started from then, almost 20 years ago, on using the spike protein of the SARS for coronavirus. The common cold is a coronavirus, and for years, people have been working on trying to find a vaccine for that. In 2012, another coronavirus, the MERS, outbreak took place, and that stimulated further research. So the history of coronavirus vaccine production or research really goes back well beyond just COVID-19. The vaccine will promote takeover of the DNA false. We just spoke about that. This is where we have the challenge with social media. Social media sees a bit of things and builds on it, promotes it, and in the absence of a full view, as with science, then it becomes a problem for us all to try and debunk. What are some of the other things? J&J clot formation. Yes, that's true. But clot formation with the J&J vaccine will occur in 0.00008% of cases. I will expand on that a little longer, but the bottom line is that yes, there's no question that you can get clot formation, but the frequency of which it will take place is so small that it's virtually insignificant. Vaccines are not what it used to be. Absolutely correct. Technology has moved on. So we're using mRNA delivery technology. We're using adenovirus delivery technology. Cars don't drive, they don't have the same kinds of engines they have 20, 30 years ago. Technology has moved. You can get COVID from the vaccine. That's false. It does not use any of the genetic material from the virus. It only uses the spike proteins from the coats. The vaccines have dead baby cells in it. Again, that's false. There's no production of these vaccines using any cell lines from aborted babies. These vaccines also don't have any antibiotics in it, so there's no risk of allergies as may be found for some of the vaccines which use penicillins. And they also have no preservatives, which is why we run into problems when we pull up too much vaccine at the beginning of the day, that we end up having vaccines to dump, because it cannot be sustained over a number of hours. Nanoparticles are present. Yes, nanoparticles are present in the vaccine, but there's nothing wrong with a nanoparticle. All a nanoparticle says is that it's a tiny particle. There's nothing good or bad about it. So the impression that's given is that nanoparticles are bad. And because nanoparticles are present, it's a problem. Nanoparticles are just small particles, not an issue with them being present. And no, there are no microchips in the vaccine. Concerns with safety. All the steps in development were completed. What happened is that the steps were run concurrently, whereas normally they'd be run sequentially. So you do phase 1, then phase 2, then phase 3. Phase 1 and 2 and 3 were run all together. And if it is that they didn't work, they dumped that and moved on. They could only do that because they had pretty much blank checks from the major developed countries, which allowed for the vaccine development to take place in a record time. But all the steps were taken with respect to safety. None of these steps were missed. Back to the clots that we mentioned. So if you have COVID infection, you may get 165,000 cases of clots in 1 million infections. If you're a cigarette smoker, you may find that you have 1,800 cases of clots per million smokers. If you're on the birth control pill, 50 to 1,200 cases in 1 million patients. With the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, there may be 6 cases in 6.8 million doses administered. That's the 0.0000, I lose track of the zeros, 8%. So it's virtually a non-issue. Real as it is, the frequency of it is so small as to be almost infinitesimal. So at the end of the day, which is the best vaccine to get? Many persons are allowing themselves to slip by, or allowing the AstraZeneca to slip by, waiting for something else. The best vaccine to get is the first vaccine that you can get. Because at the end of the day, although there are all sorts of figures regarding the efficacy and the protection level and so on, all vaccines having come to market have an acceptable level of protection. And it's almost splitting hairs as to which one to choose. And in closing, I'll leave this figure with you. Sometimes it helps to listen to the experts. They may have something to say as to how things should be done.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nemhard, for that comprehensive presentation, sharing with us quite a bit of information in relation to the coronavirus disease, the clinical features, the distribution, the complications, the risk factors, what we know, what we don't know, offering a case study in terms of what is happening in the United States, and sharing with us the fact that vaccines have been effective in the past and continue to be effective in the present, and offering us a clear sense that we have to make a decision between our rights and our health. I want to thank each of you for sharing. I want to remind our viewers that you can call in your question at 876-861-9655. But I want to put a couple of questions to each of you as a kind of starter for this section where we will just have a conversation among ourselves. I want to start with, of course, the president of JCC, Reverend Dixon. What is the JCC's position and possibly the church's position on mandatory vaccination? Is there a position on that?
The council has not yet had the opportunity to consider that issue, although maybe three of our member bodies, the heads of three of our member bodies have expressed views from their perspective on the question. I'm suspecting that we'll very quickly, in fact, we are in the process of ventilating the matter. And I'm sure that within a very short time, the council might want to issue a statement on that issue. But at the moment, we have not yet, as a council, had an opportunity to discuss it and come up with a position.
And Professor Abel, you did say that you advocate for mandatory vaccination. How do you see that working in our country, a country which I suppose takes very seriously our rights and our demand to do what we want to do when we want to do it and how we want to do it?
Well, let me just reflect on, for example, what is happening in many private sector companies now that a lot of them have put in place, or several of them have put in place policies where they're asking employees to be vaccinated, or if they can't show that, then they should have a regular COVID test at their expense. What many companies are actually seeing is an increase in the number of persons who are getting vaccinated. And as I alluded to, our childhood immunization program several years ago, when immunization levels were low in Jamaica. What shifted the dial was when the government actually passed legislation to make it mandatory for children to be vaccinated before they could enter school. And of course, with that, we saw an increase in vaccination. I think increasingly, we're coming to recognize in Jamaica and the world that, and I'm repeating myself, if that we're going to return our lives to normality, if we're going to get our children back into school, if we're going to have church opening so that we can worship together, if we're going to want to see economic recovery, we want to see the hotel industry, transportation industry coming back, hospitality industry, then we'll just have to mandate vaccine. It's just a matter of time, it's going to happen. It has to happen. It's just a matter of time. And most people are just going to fall in line. If you want to go to the USA, if you want to get a visa, you'll have to get your vaccine. If you want to go travel to many countries, you'll have to do it. If you want to go on the farm work program, you'll have to do it. So it's just a matter of time. So nowadays, I don't really have time to lose sweat or to work up myself anymore on this, right? I think we're not beginning to get involved in a conversation that is for a time long past, right? Whether we like it or not, the time is coming soon that if we want to move forward, we'll have to get vaccinated.
Thank you, Professor Abel. Dr. Nemhard, a question, and I want you to speak about the mandatory vaccination piece, but there are some persons are asking, well, what percentage will allow us to have herd immunity? What is it that we need to achieve in order to get that?
Well, the figures have varied over time. There are those who have said we're looking at a low of maybe 60% and perhaps a high of as much as 80 or even beyond, particularly with this virus. But I want to weigh in on the mandatory vaccine situation as well. I do believe that with time we will get there, but for me the qualifier is with time. The challenge we have had year to date is that we have not had adequate supplies of vaccines, nor have we had adequate access to vaccines. So I'm not yet at the position of saying that we have a significant proportion of our population that's anti-vax. I think when we have adequate access and the vaccine stations are sitting empty, then we will know what our true coverage is and where the hesitancy and or true resistance lies. Having said that, however, there is room in the legal space for companies to be doing exactly what Prof. Abel says, whereby they're saying, listen, if you want to work in my office, if you want to be looking after my clients, you do need to be immunized, etc. So I think there are these pockets which can be pushed a little harder to get to be immunized. But it begs a question for me, if at present 90% of the population is not immunized, how do we mandate it? Are we going to go out in the streets with the syringes and hold people down and stick them with it? So I think we have to move a little further towards acceptance, pockets that are more amenable to whatever movement, moving our percentage much higher up before then we're looking at mandating. And of course, we have to look at the educational issues, the handling the resistance issues, more discussions. That is just my view in terms of us getting to mandating. To use the same example which Prof. Abel gave, the legal framework for us to have mandatory vaccines for children and the whole process behind it took about 3 years to do that. It wasn't one day we woke up and said, we need to have this done. Okay, here we go. We're mandating it. So there was a process in terms of the education, knocking down the resistance bars that there were before the law came into effect.
But can I follow up with that, Dr. Nemhard, because in your presentation, you made a significant point, which I think is an issue for many people. You mentioned that 2.3% of those who are infected actually, are part of the fatality rate. Is this not part of the issue that people have, that enough people not dying from it? I'm likely to recover. Other people have had it and that kind of stuff. What is the point of taking the vaccine? I'm going to catch it anyway. Is that not part of the hesitancy that it's really not going to kill us? So let's not take it at all.
Right, and it's the gamble that an individual will take with their own life if they so choose. But because of the nature of the spread of COVID and the fact that there are other susceptible persons, the issue now becomes, do I become my brother's keeper? And with the vaccines, do I now also make a decision to protect myself? Because even for persons, although we say you can spread it if you have received the vaccine, what we recognize is that the viral load, meaning the amount of virus, say, in the respiratory tract, is lower than for persons who are not vaccinated. So yes, you may still spread, but not to the same degree.
Okay, thanks. Dr. Abel, there is this issue that the church faces, and COVID-19 has really put a spanner in the works. It's an issue of touch. A lot of our practices are predicated on the ability to touch someone else, or baptisms, or greetings, that kind of stuff. What do you think ought to be the way in which a church understands that? And maybe I should frame it differently. I think it is far more important for those who are elderly and live alone, because if you live in a family, in your own family circles, you're touching. For those who are single and live alone, you shared some tools and some ideas in terms of how people can cope. What would you say about the issue of touch?
Well, all right. I'm going to answer the question partially, and then I'm going to defer to Dr. Nemhard to give his public health perspective on it. And then if you allow me after that, I want to ask Dr. Nemhard a question about the fact that he's one of the persons who has been, he's actually participating in the private vaccination program, and for him to elaborate how it works and so on, because I think I'd like to know myself, but I'm sure some persons would want to know. But yeah, touching, embracing is very important. It's nurturing. It can be consoling, and all of those good things. But unfortunately, because of the nature of the spread of the COVID virus, we know these things are certainly discouraged. Yes, especially in a population with a low vaccination level. I know in many countries, in other jurisdictions where there's high vaccination rate, then they say, well, if you're in an environment and you're operating in a bubble and people are fully vaccinated and so on, then it may be safer. It's maybe more acceptable for you to touch and so on. But I wouldn't certainly encourage it in Jamaica, where the vaccination level is low. And I certainly would want to hear Dr. Nemhard's perspective, because I sometimes just want to confine my comments to my area of expertise, which is mental.
Dr. Nemhard, you're being put on the spot.
So I realize. But what was the question exactly, though, Prof? What you wanted?
The one is about, no, I was talking about, he had asked about touching and what we think about touching, embracing within a church community, within the current context, and what's our perspective on it. I mean, I gave I recognize that it's important from a psychological, emotional point of view, but I raise concerns about touching and hugging and embracing within the context of the current pandemic. I just want to get your public health perspective.
Yeah, the spread of COVID really is related to aerosol droplets. So although there is the potential for spread from contaminated objects or from hugging and so on, the fact though is that if you're hugging, you're that close, and it's back to the droplets aerosol potential. So that's the challenge we all have. How do you get close? How do you maintain physical contact, but still manage somehow to minimize the risk as it relates to aerosol spread? And that's where the business of continued masking remains in force, even for persons who are immunized.
Okay. And I think Professor Abel also wanted you to elaborate on the relationship you share with the government in terms of your center being one that offers the vaccine.
Right. So with the public-private partnership initiative, what happens is that the center, as in our case, we have a contract with the government in which they supply us with the vaccines. We in turn supply the public with the vaccines, and of course it's free of cost to the public. Any billing arrangement is based on us billing the government in relation to the vaccines that we have administered. I don't know if that answers all of the question.
Yes, that's important because it means that I can therefore walk into your office, a doctor's office, get my vaccine. I don't have to go to one of those centers, form long line. I may not have to even take public transportation or charter a vehicle to get to that point. We just walk in, make an appointment, come in and get our...
Right. In our case, we have actually partnered with a church right across the road from us, the Church of the Open Bible. So we in fact use their location to do the vaccines because we would not be able to manage the traffic in our office setting. So they have a nice church hall, nice open space, and the facilities really work very well. We've been working with companies to have them bring in their employees. So like today we had a company truck, like what, about 40 or more of their employees down to us, give them the vaccines and they go back. So this is the means by which we're looking at getting the numbers up. And also, as I said, us getting our coverage up. And before we even get to the point of mandating, because this is part of the trouble, particularly for private sector, they don't tolerate very well their employees being out for 5-6 hours in a line waiting to get a vaccine. Now they have the ability to make an appointment with us. We make an arrangement for their staff. They bring them in, we get them out, and they're literally back at work in an hour or so. So these are some of the methods I think we need to be adopting more of before we get into mandating. I think we will get there. It's already there in some places, but I feel we need to look at winning hearts and minds, picking off susceptible pockets before we go for a blanket national mandate.
Thank you so much. We're almost at the end of this discussion. I'm going to invite you to just share your final thoughts as we wrap up. I'm going to start with Reverend Dixon. Your closing thoughts on this matter of how we overcome this COVID crisis in our country. You're muted.
Thank you, Reverend Stevens. I think in my closing remarks would be that we continue these conversations. I agree with the two experts that ultimately we have to get to whatever herd immunity is, and which we get there is probably the issue. And I think the qualification, the timeliness with which we get there. I want to urge all of our brothers and sisters to continue the conversation, reasonable, meaningful conversations, because as we do that, more light is shed, more discernment is gained, and decisions can be made, wise decisions. Thank you so much.
Dr. Nemhard?
I would say that we need to just remember the history of vaccines. We have a long tried and proven history of vaccines. This is a new vaccine, but it's still in the path with the knowledge that we have, the experience, the expertise. And despite all of what has been said, the vaccines have been proven to be very safe, very effective, not to carry a lot of the side effects and concerns which people have raised in relation to these vaccines. So I'd urge people to sit with their practitioners, pay attention to credible sources, and not be swayed by messages which are coming from sources which are questionable.
Thank you so much. Professor Abel?
I want to congratulate the Webster Memorial Church, United Church, and the wider church community for organizing this. I think the conversation is important. Church plays a critical role in the society in more ways than one. But also out of concern that a lot of the resistance towards vaccine also lies within the wider church community, right? And just want us to continue the dialogue. And this is another forum that offers opportunity for us to get together, chat, but also to maintain that personal connection that is so important as we navigate these very tough and rough times.
Thank you. So I'm hearing us saying, let's continue the conversations. Let's continue to inform people, and let's continue to encourage credible sources. Have consultation with those who are experts, because I think that's important. But also let us think about the other person as we make our decisions. I think what we've heard today hopefully will lead some persons to reconsider doing what is right in their own best interest and in the interest of others. Thank you so much. We're going to now have a formal vote of thanks from Mr. Kwame Miller. But again, I want to thank you on behalf of the Webster family for coming along and offering your time and your expertise on a matter that just won't go away.
Thank you, Rev. Good night, everyone. My name is Kwame Miller. It's my pleasure to thank the special persons who contributed to making tonight's discussion possible. Our three panelists, Dr. Orville Nemhard, Reverend Dixon, and Professor Wendell Abel, and our excellent moderator, Reverend Norbert. We'd like to thank you all for the time that you took out of your busy schedules to prepare and present such rich information that allowed us to have a meaningful and impactful discussion tonight. We have been called to plant seeds, but it's God who reaps the harvest. And you gentlemen have certainly planted good seeds tonight. And now we'll trust God to allay the fears and concerns that persons may have, and also convict them of their social responsibilities to get vaccinated and to protect his gift of life. Webster would like to present a token to all the panelists and the moderator, and we have selected the second edition of the book, Orchids of Jamaica. I'm going to bring it up on screen so you can see it. So someone from church will be contacting all you four gentlemen to arrange for the handover of this book. I hope that you will find it useful and probably share it with others as well. So thank you so much for your time. We also would like to thank our sponsors. So we have a number of sponsors tonight who will help to make this possible. I have their names on screen. Ennis Medical and Dental Supplies, your one-stop shop for a CPAP supplier, and Davidson and Hannah, Chartered Quantity Surveyors. So their numbers and their addresses are on screen. Thank you so much for contributions. We really appreciated it. And we want to thank the very talented Simone McVoigt, who designed the flyer for us. We're very, very grateful for that. The technical team members who are on duty tonight, and the planning team, which consisted of Mrs. Elaine Commission, Miss Ingrid Cole, Mrs. Pansy Hamilton, Reverend Delroy Harris, and myself. Thank you all as well for logging on tonight and listening to the conversation and your questions as well. We hope that some of your questions were answered and some of your fears have been allayed. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Reverend Harris, but thanks again for listening. Thanks again for participating. Reverend Harris?
Thank you so very much, my brother Kwame. Friends, indeed, it was a wonderful and an awesome night. And we give God thanks for this time. Let us look to him in prayer. Let's pray. Eternal God, our Heavenly Father, as we bring this evening's webinar to a close, we give you thanks for your presence with us throughout the session and how you have led your servants in sharing their knowledge and helping to guide your people in this very important topic on the COVID-19 vaccine. We bless your name for your loving kindness in providing the members of the panel and all those who contributed to the execution of the plans around this event. Continue to consecrate and use each individual for your work in this world. We pray for your continued mercy and grace and your healing touch on the afflicted as we all navigate this pandemic. Thank you for all that you have done and will continue to do. We pray this in the name of Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen. Let's now receive the benediction. Let us depart with a caring attitude towards our neighbors and loved ones by taking the vaccine. The Lord bless you and keep you as we listen to his still small voice and exercise wisdom. May the peace of God be with us now and always. Amen.
Thank you.